and he will be speaking about winning over LPs, Dealbreakers and solutions for stablecoin protocols.
Cool. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Alessandro, I'm with Dialectic. I'll give a brief talk right now about risk management in DeFi. So for context, we run these broad exposure DeFi yielding funds, and we yield on stablecoins, on ETH and on Bitcoin. And so we do like large scale, broad exposure to DeFi yields. And this year alone, we deployed over 400 individual positions in DeFi across around 80 protocols on 14 chains. And what I kind of want to walk everyone through is how we approach risk management to be able to deploy capital in a large scale into many different protocols, moving assets from pool to pool, and how we manage the risk to be able to do this sustainably. And basically, I will go through the different risk categories that we have and that we monitor. We look at kind of like 6 broad categories of risk. So we look at chain risk, so all the risks associated with the underlying blockchain infrastructure and the chain that the liquidity pools are on. We look at bridge risk, so anything that's related to the bridging infrastructure that we may have exposure to if we are LPing into pools that have bridged assets, then we have exposure to the underlying bridge. And then what the focus will be for this talk is smart contract risk, economic risk, governance, and yield risk. So smart contract is anything that has to do with exploits. So whenever we deploy capital into some protocol, we take exposure to some set of smart contracts. And we need to understand what the risk is on the smart contracts that we have exposure to. Also, all of these protocols implement some economic mechanisms. So these could be lending markets, AMMs, yield trading. All of them have some underlying economic mechanism that's implemented by the smart contracts. And these also need to be sound. So like a lending market needs to have good risk management around collateral and liquidation risk and all of these things. And then we also look at governance, of course. So this is mainly about upgradability, because whenever we take exposure to a protocol and to the smart contracts of the protocol, we look at a snapshot of how the protocol is set up. But if it is upgradable, the risk profile may change from one day to the other if the smart contracts change, if there is an upgrade to the implementation, and so on. And lastly, we, as a fund, we need to also look at the return side. So a thing that we also need to consider is like when we deposit liquidity into a liquidity pool and we are earning some rewards or some incentives, what's the liquidity profile of those? How can we harvest them, and so on. So the way that we look at risk on like a fundamental basis is that we have some tooling to break down dependency trees of DeFi protocols. So we have this tool called Nebula, where we can put in a pool address, and it automatically goes on chain and scans the contract interactions, and it's able to generate a dependency graph of the protocol. So in this example, you can see this is a pool on Aerodrome, it's USDC and USD from Reserve. And as you can see, there's like a lot of dependencies on Circle, on Aerodrome, on Reserve, on Tether, and a bunch of other stuff. Yep. And so now I'll go through each one of the risk categories to kind of just like visualize how we look at the different spectrum. So the things that we look at for smart contract risk is mainly like the age of the contract, like how long the contracts have been online and how much TVL they have. So that's kind of like a proxy for lindiness. We look at the number and quality of audits to understand, like have some professional high quality auditors look at the contract and did proper audits. And so the thing that we like to see most is like protocols that have smart contracts that have been online for a very long time with a lot of TVL. And that have been audited multiple times by high quality auditors. And then as you can see, like if we go up into the degen level of risk, this is all the new protocols with low TVL, with audits that may not be by the best companies. On the economic side, we mainly care about pegs of tokens. So if we have exposure to different stable coins in a liquidity pool, we need to like understand how stable those pegs are, what is the risk that we have in permanent loss on a token depegging and things like that. And here, the best case is like over-collateralized stable coins that don't have oracles, there's no impermanent loss risk. So then the risk profile is really low. But if it's like a stable coin that has like volatile collateral, that has like oracles that are based on market price, and that there is impermanent loss risk, then of course those end up in a higher risk category. And there's always also some deal breakers here, so things that we like totally don't deploy into, even that's like the risk category above degen risk, which is just like not allowed to put capital into. That's anything that is like under collateralized or endogenously collateralized. So like Terra Luna, for example, was like not part of the risk framework at all. Also like any assets that have high impermanent loss risk, any stable coins that are very volatile, is things that we just can't deploy into from the investment mandate of the funds. On the governance side, we mainly afraid of malicious smart contract updates. So most of you probably saw the Radiant hack and how that got executed, and like smart contracts being upgradable without a time lock is very dangerous. So this is also part of our due diligence, where we need to understand what parts of the protocols can be updated, how is the updating process, is there a time lock, what's the multi-sig, what's the process to change the underlying exposures. And here again, like best case is fully immutable or like upgradable, but with a very long time lock. Because then we, as like LPs, we can do a risk assessment on the pending changes, we can see what's gonna change, and then in case it's something that we don't like, we can withdraw the liquidity before the changes take effect. And then things that are like fully upgradable, if it's only like a multi-sig with 3 out of 5 and there's no time locked, and then of course is a lot more dangerous, because we're not just trusting that the team is honest and won't rug the pool, but then it's also a question about what is the OPSEC of the 3 signers on the multi-sig. And if they get compromised, then someone could maliciously update. And lastly, in terms of like the yield realization, so we don't like points because it's not actual yield until they become tokens. So that's something that from a perspective of the risk of realizing the returns is very low. And so yeah, this is the different categories. Ideal yield is paid in kind. So anything that's real-time incentives that are liquid, that we can sell, that's perfect. Anything that's like future yield is a lot more difficult for us to manage, and we usually need to factor in some discount on the yield. That was my talk. Most of my team and myself will be around, so if you have any questions about risk management, feel